Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 47 of the HaskinCast Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and I'm very, very, very excited to bring you this week's guest. We have been trying for quite some time to be able to sync our schedules up, and the timing just hasn't worked out. But we were finally able to set a little time aside, and then we ended up recording for a couple of hours. So this is actually going to be, as you probably saw in the title, a two-part episode with my dear friend, Marcus Weiss, who is a phenomenal actor, director, just an all-around great guy to be around. He's married to Anastasia Weiss, who I interviewed a few months ago. I think it was in, I want to say December. But she was one of the earlier guests on the podcast. And they have now, I just saw, been nominated for some new awards here in Las Vegas, which I'm very excited about. They're both fantastic people and very talented, just amazing at what they do. So I'm very, very excited to have finally been able to sit down and talk to Marcus. And we talk about all kinds of stuff, the different projects that we've worked on together, some stuff about philosophy and life and, how the world works. Maybe we've solved a problem or two. We shall see. But just because of the flow of the conversation and the timing, I had to break it up in slightly a weird place because there was really no good place to do it because the conversation just flowed so well. So I just kind of cut it where I could. So I'll be bringing on the rest of his interview in the very near future. I've been, it's weird. I go through these periods where I have a hard time timing people getting on the show. And then there's last minute cancellations and schedule changes. And then I end up with like 4 or 5 shows that I'm recording within a few days and I've got to schedule them out. And of course, I'm coming up on the big 50th episode. So I'm trying to do something extra special for that as well. Whether that'll work out or not, I don't know. So far it hasn't, but we'll see. If not, it's going to be a great show no matter what. But before I bring Marcus on the show, there's something else I want to talk to you guys about. Last night, I did my very first ever float in saltwater in what used to be horribly named a sensory deprivation tank and is now something way more positive. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head. But I did this for the first time last night, and it was pretty incredible. The place I went, True Rest, which has places in Sedona and here in Vegas. And I believe there are some other places. But the whole experience is that you strip off all your clothes and then you go into this tank and you literally float on top of the water because of the high salt concentration. You have to work really hard to touch the bottom with anything other than your hands. It's actually more of a challenge than it is a joy. So really the goal is to just float there, to really not move around much, just let the experience sort of take you over. And I'm a little bit hydrophobic, so I was happy that they had a neck pillow that you could use in the water to kind of keep your head up. I did try it without the neck pillow. And the water just got a little too close to my eyes for my taste. I'm a little paranoid about that. So, but the pillow is there. It's a great help. And you have the option of turning on different colored, very subtle lighting. You also have the option to turn off the lights entirely. And you have an option for music on or off. And so you can go from a completely soundless, completely lack of visual experience to, having some soft glowing lights on, having some music that plays. It's all very, very well done. And True Rest is great because they really kind of thought of everything. From the walkthrough, they show you where everything is, what you have access to. There's an oxygen bar, there's water, there's some delicious tea. There's a shower in your room so that you can shower before and after, get some of that salt off of you before you put your clothes back on. There is bathrooms that you can use. And they thought of everything like shampoo, deodorant, Q-tips, all the stuff that you might need. Very, very thoughtful. They do give you earplugs for the actual float, which are great. They're a little different than the ones I normally use from Eargasm. So they took a little bit for me to get used to, but they're more like clay and they mold very nicely. But the whole experience was great. I didn't realize that it would be a little bit hard to breathe because the water is body temperature. So it's not like you kind of expect if you're going to go into a body of water, it's going to be warm and, you're going to have fun and whatever. But this is really designed so that you don't necessarily feel the water. So it was a little cooler than I had anticipated. And so my sinuses plugged up a little bit, making it a little bit hard to breathe. I was trying to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth, and I kind of gave up on that very quickly. But it wasn't uncomfortable, but it was something to be aware of. Definitely, it's one of those things that I think everyone should try once in their life. And if you like it, do it again. And if you don't like it, you don't have to do it again, but you can say you did it and you don't have to wonder what it's like. But it's definitely an experience. And I kind of equate it to, if you've ever seen a frog just laying on top of the water, that's pretty much what it is. And I kept trying to, like, every time I wanted to move around, I kept telling myself, just be the frog, just be the frog. And that worked. But it's an hour long. And you don't have any sense of time. So you don't know if you've been in there for 15 minutes or 45 minutes. But there's these jets that come on as the filter kicks in. And that's kind of your, okay, now we're done and it's time to get up and go. But yeah, it's really a fascinating thing. And I definitely recommend it. The folks at True Float are absolutely amazing. Gave them a wonderful Yelp review. And it's really important that we do that too. One of the motels I stayed at in Phoenix, I gave a terrible review because I spent more time killing bugs than I did actually sleeping. So they got a bad review. True Float got a wonderful review. And it's basic math. If you take care of things and you tend to them, then you'll have good things happen. If your numbers are clean, then you have great results. So check them out if you're in Sedona, if you're in Las Vegas, and then go to their website and see where else they have locations at that you can enjoy. I don't know if they're expanding into other areas, but they're definitely here on the West Coast. If you can't get to a true rest, I definitely still suggest going to anywhere you can that has these tanks. They're pretty amazing. And it's total isolation, total privacy. So you can get in and just enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited after weeks and weeks of trying to schedule a time that both Marcus and I were available at the same time, which is, that's like winning the lottery to me. I'm happy to bring on the show Marcus Weiss. Marcus, how are you, my friend?
Oh, my goodness. I'm better now that I'm talking to you. I'm so excited for this.
Why, thank you. You're always so kind. I appreciate that about you.
Well, that's sweet, but that's a reciprocal thing. That goes both ways. It's like an energy bounce. Oh, absolutely.
I'm very aggressive, I'm told.
You're very aggressive?
Yes.
Your kindness is aggressive. Aggressive kindness. Maybe, is that possible?
Well, if so, I'd like to think I invented it or had some hand in it.
I think so, absolutely. Who can be the kinder person? Just keep pushing.
Yeah. And I think I did say to somebody one time, I will out happy anyone.
Dude.
I think I did say that.
I did say that one. That is a t-shirt. Anytime you come up with a good idea, you have to put it. It's like copywriting a thing. You got to, I don't know, go on one of those t-shirt design websites and plug it right in. Claim it.
I'm getting on Vistaprint right now and designing it. I'll make a logo and everything.
Yeah.
I was referred to once as a magical ball of happy.
A magical ball of happy.
I love that.
That's a separate t-shirt.
Yes.
So one of them is I'll out happy anyone. And then what a big ball of happy?
A magical ball of happy.
A magical ball of happy, not happiness.
Right.
That's not, no.
Just happy. How can you, I just wanted to hug that person for the rest of eternity. That's an incredible thing to say about somebody.
It is.
But we're not here to talk about my shininess. I want to talk about you, man, because you are, to me, from the few years that I've known you now, I'm just blown away by so many things about you that I want to share with everybody on the planet and maybe even off-planet people. I first saw you in a play, and you might have to help me with the title, but it was a play that you were doing at the Temple, directed by Kate St. Pierre. I believe it was a table read, because I think you guys had your scripts. Disgraced.
It was called Disgraced. Mm-hmm.
That was an incredibly powerful play. I remember just being stunned by the dialogue. It just made me think about the way that we talk to each other, the way that we perceive each other. And I try to be aware of that anyway, but it's one of those eye-opening things. Tell us a little bit about what it was about and how you felt in your role.
Oh my goodness. You are taking me back. quite a ways. You know, it was a play that became very popular sort of in sort of the aftermath of 9/11 and about sort of, you know, interpersonal, interracial relations and sort of the relativity and of how we perceive ourselves versus how we're actually treating other people. And the play involved two couples, and one of them came over for dinner, and they were work colleagues. You know, so one of them was a work colleague of myself, and myself and my wife invited them over for dinner, and I don't want to give too much away of the play, but it had to do, and then. But there was awkwardnesses, and there was missed promotions going on, and it had to do with, and then my projections as to why this other person got promoted versus me, and so I'm looking up, as we speak. I wanted to look up sort of a clever summary of the play, but let's not go into that.
I remember it was kind of racially based, not racially, but religiously based, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, about religion and why, and what sort of religions dictate. In this case, it had to do. I was Jewish and somebody else was Muslim, and sort of the tensions in there, and how liberal we think we are, but versus how we actually treat other people and how we project on other people. And then there was there was also infidelity involved, and
right.
sort of an honesty and ultimately I think one of the great challenges of it, what also made it so great, was sort of these layers of honesty and who we like to think we are versus how we actually feel underneath, and that if there's too much of a discrepancy between those two things, it creates this sort of explosive tension that then ultimately it's like, I'm actually not that person at all, and here's how I really feel about you, and that's actually what I'm going to say. And I think life is, in a society is there's a balance there, because we can't just say everything we feel. We're constantly in this space of out of consideration about and out of love for other people, in this place of wanting to reconcile feelings we might have in the moment. So we're always checking in with ourselves, like, okay, what is that, and where am I coming from, and is that justified, and how can I before we actually speak our mind, but we always want to find a way to balance that, so we're coming from a truthful, honest place. I think when we integrate, when we're interacting with other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's another layer that we could add to this, which is not only our perception versus what we discover our reality of who we are is, but also the people that we interact with, what their perception is of us, but keeping in mind that it's based on their experiences and how they perceive people, not just saying, I think you're this way, and that's actually who you are, but understanding where that comes from. And that's what I really loved about this play, was the depth of that. There was times where you could tell the characters were actively listening, and there's times where you could tell the characters stopped listening and were forming rebuttals, and important points were being missed. And I think that was a great representation of reality. I just thought it was a very powerful play. And I remember that was the first time I saw you, and we hadn't met yet, but I remember shaking your hand after the show and saying, great job. And you were like, oh, thanks. And I thought, this guy's good. Like, he's got some real skills. And it wasn't even until after we worked together on Brightside that I put together that you were the same guy I saw in that play.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but very, very powerful. I was so touched that night. But the setup for me, I got to tell you, is a little weird, because you guys performed that at the Jewish temple. And I had never been there. And I'm, obviously I'm good friends with Kate St. Pierre, who directed that. And she's like, oh, no, you should come down. I'm like, is it okay? Like, am I allowed? I'm not Jewish, right? And I was so afraid of being disrespectful or maybe being kicked out because I shouldn't be there or whatever, that I was kind of nervous going in. So I think that there was a certain edge that I had, kind of just being even in that location, that maybe opened up my perceptors a little bit more to the play. But I thought the play was fantastic. I really did. So glad I saw it.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely, there was definitely something interesting too, but specifically about being performed at the temple. I mean, because we had connection, we had connections. Both Kate and I had connections to the space, and it was it was helpful to have a space. But the one of the main characters, not the character that I played, but the other character was a character who was raised Muslim in Manhattan, who was married to a white artist, visual artist, who worked a lot with Islamic imagery and stuff. So there was also, and then sort of in the app, and we had talks after the performances, where we had a rabbi. Gosh, it's so long ago, but one of the rabbis spoke. But then I think we invited somebody else who was from Muslim background to speak, and then we talked about larger issues of race and religion relations,
right?
In the aftermath. So there was definitely something that we used from that context.
As an actor, do you think it's kind of risky to take roles that deal with such heavy topics, or in theater, do you feel like that's really the venue where you can do it because it's not really judged the way that like a film would be?
Oh, I don't know. You know what? I'm not sure. That's really interesting. I've never heard somebody ask that question, sort of comparing it to what film's role might be. In theater, we talk a lot about, and there's something really powerful about raising questions, right? And sort of, and oftentimes, big questions rather than just entertain. I think sometimes we can, hopefully package something in an entertainment, in an entertaining way, but raising big questions in the theater is often what theater artists aim to do. So that you walk out of the theater sort of answering those questions for yourself rather than having it answered for you during the performance, so that it stirs something in you can take, so that you end up taking with you part of the experience. And oftentimes I think we talk about too how that might even distinguish art from entertainment.
That's really well said. And especially I like that you use the word stir, because I think that's kind of what happens to me with a lot of plays that I've seen since I've moved here to Vegas, is that just about every one of them has made me walk out of there kind of questioning how I feel about something. Yes. And I like that. I like that it's not just, you pay your money, you go see it, and then it's over, and then you're like, okay, now what are we going to do? Or let's go get dessert or whatever. I mean, it really kind of leaves you with something to walk away with.
Sure. But can theater be something like like a roller coaster ride? Where you're like, oh my God, that was awesome.
Yes.
That was awesome. I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life or something. And then you can still walk away and go, okay, now are we going to go have lunch? Depending on how your stomach feels.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, look at how many years ago this play was. And it's still, I mean, it's touched me to that point that I really wanted to talk to you about this, some years later.
Right.
So that really says about the lasting impression that you get from something. And I really like that. I really do.
That's interesting that you asked, like whether it's a hard thing to do. It's interesting. I've been doing it for a long time. I've been performing for a long time and interpreting roles for a long time, and I'm always up there trying to get into the character and tell the story of the character, or what's this character doing, or why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, or whether it's a clown role, or whether it's a dramatic role, or whether it's a comedic role. Sort of the work of the role for me is always the focus. I think it's not until I have conversations like this or conversations after the plays that have been talkback situations where I might think about the larger role of what it is that I'm doing. I generally I leave that up to the directors or the producers, or something. I have yet to, I'm trying to be accurate. I don't think I've ever hesitated or turned down something because it was too tense. I was about to use the word like incendiary or something like that. But I haven't necessarily gravitated towards something like that. I haven't necessarily been in the vein or functioned a lot sort of in the vein of activist or something like that. That's not generally been a huge part of my my trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, I know that there's theater companies that whose mission is maybe a little more along those lines.
Oh, sure.
But I've generally experienced my existence as a performer and specifically in the role of just inhabiting what it is that I'm asked to do, or that I'm excited to do. And so it's all kind of the same.
Right. And I guess, I mean, if you're an actor, the job is to play that role or develop that character, regardless of if it's something that you would do or feel in your personal life.
Oh, yeah, of course. Oh, yeah, that goes without saying. Right.
But at the same point, like, I think a lot of actors tend to shy away from roles that might make them feel like they're viewed a certain way because of the character's beliefs versus their own. Because some people can't separate that as fans. You know?
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Are you distinguishing in that way to film too, or somebody's like super popular, like in film, they're like a movie star, and they don't want to go and do a play that involves something political or nudity or something like that?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Well, and if you look at the backlash, though, of like the girl that was in whichever Star Wars movie it was, where she did a certain thing that upset the audience, and they went to attacking that person as an actor in real life for the decisions that her character made.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just, I mean, obviously ridiculous, but that's the reality of people.
I see. I think, probably, particularly I would imagine, particularly in the realm of popular entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like movies or TV or something like that. You'd hope we were becoming more, open-minded in terms of how we perceive artists. But one of the things about, I suppose, maybe one of the things about film is that, or in TV is that I think when we're watching something on the screen, one of the things that happens is we get absorbed in it in a way that perhaps, ironically, maybe people don't when they're in the theater. Like, even though we're live with people inside a theater, that we're actually closer to the actual people, perhaps people are absorbed in a different way.
There is less distance, that's sure, yeah.
That you see these people on the screen in even in a more intimate way. You're I don't know, I was thinking about maybe they perceive that as more of a reality. Mm-hmm. It's hard to distinguish between the actor and the character when you're watching screen. I don't know.
Right. And plus with the play, you get to see the actors a lot of times afterwards, and you can interact with them and do like question and answer dialogue, which I absolutely love.
Mm-hmm. And that you're in a theater.
There's a reality to the reality of it. I agree with that. Now, you actually, you used to work for the Blue Man Group. Was that your first like big thing that you got into, or was there something before that?
No, it was the most high profile thing I had done to date. Probably, I'd worked a lot in New York. I was a working actor in New York before I got cast to open the show at the Luxor here in Las Vegas in 2000. Mm-hmm. And Blue Man had already opened New York, Boston, and Chicago at that point. So they were really well known. Mm-hmm. And it was a big deal for them to open a huge show in Vegas, and it was both sort of big Blue Man news as well as big Las Vegas news that they were coming here, and so that was a huge jump for me. I mean, I had done off-Broadway stuff, and I had worked on some high-profile projects, but not in a big role, So for me, that was probably the biggest thing I'd done to date in 2000. And I stayed with them for 10 years. Wow. And then after that, I got to perform with both regularly and as an understudy for the Second City in Las Vegas. And so that was another huge, that they're another wonderful, huge company. And then it just sort of.
Yeah, they're a pretty big deal. And plus, I mean, if you're doing the same job for 10 years, I mean, it's nice to have the stability and everything. But for somebody who is just an actor, that might be fine. But for somebody who's an actor and a creative and has all these talents, it's probably hard to not explore all kinds of other things. And after a while, I would imagine that you kind of just have to grow on your own.
You mean so that it gets
a little stale?
A little stale? Like,
yeah.
Well, yeah. I think, what's interesting is that I think I got both really I guess lucky. I mean, I got really blessed with that because Blue Man, there's so much improvisation in Blue Man, and then also the Blue Man, cast and directors and band were always. Well, not anymore because I'm not with the show anymore. But we would always, and they still do, talk about the show, the content, and how was that, and how did that go, and what do you think about this? And so it's a really sort of democratic conversation that's happening constantly with the show, so that I never got complacent, both because of how we functioned as a cast and as a company, but also because of the show itself. Because there's a lot of sections that are improvised, a lot of sections that involve audience participation. So every night it's different. So you're constantly exploring new ways to do something or fresh ways to do something. And the same thing with the Second City. A lot of it was sketch comedy, but just as much of it was improv. And so an improv is new every night. So you're always looking for something new. And then as an artist, I'm always looking for different ways to grow, whether it's about playing some kind of game internally with yourself, or because even when I was in the Reve then for almost 8 years, that's a show at the Wynn. Right. I was a clown there and had a relatively small role compared to Blue Man and the Second City. And so, but still it was a challenge it was a challenge almost to get complacent or bored with something. But you're absolutely right. The temptation is there to start thinking about, dinner.
Yeah. Right.
Why? Because, because you get so comfortable with some of the moments. At some moments you're really perhaps just standing there. So what do you do? But I hate being bored. That's like one of the worst feelings is being bored.
I'm with you on that. I can't stand that.
But I also don't easily relate to being bored because I'm like, there's so much I don't have time to do. When somebody's like, "Oh, I was bored," I'm like, "How can you be bored?"
Right.
Like even standing in the line at the DMV, which is probably, and I forgot my book. That's probably the worst, right?
Yeah.
But then I'll make up a poem or something, or I'm painting a picture.
Right. Yeah, I'm writing projects in my head or plotting, scheduling dates out or something in my head that I need to contact Marcus so that we can schedule the podcast. Oh, and you know what? I want to work on this song when I get home from standing in line. Or I can't I don't think we can stop our brains from just keeping going. It's an engine that just won't stop running.
Yeah, but maybe I need to meditate more.
That could be.
Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's a different kind of cure for boredom. Just being present and not thinking about anything.
Well, and I think that's probably going to be the challenge because for me, I love the idea of meditation, but I have a really hard time with it because I can't seem to isolate my mind from all the little drops of water I have going on in my life. And I find it very difficult. And it's ironic that I write music for that purpose. But when I try to use it, I find that I'm going, oh, I should have turned this up louder. And if I would have panned that a little more, like I'm too busy judging it, then can't really use it for meditation.
It's hard to just, right. But then you also wonder, well, where do you get the fuel, the experiences for the inspiration,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, because as a performer, a musician, a composer, like you said, a creative, we have to ultimately also tank up on just what it feels like to be alive.
That's true.
What does it feel to just sit there and absorb something? What does it feel like to instead of really being present and watching a kid play or what does it feel like to just, lie down and look up into the trees, into the canopy of trees?
Like we used to do when we were kids and we would lay on the grass and look at the clouds. And
like we used to do, right. So that when you're writing a story, when you're inspired or or whatever it is. And I think sometimes when we, it's almost like I find myself, so much of my life is spent, like you said, like coming up with stuff, or planning stuff or reenacting stuff that it doesn't leave as much time. I don't leave as much time as I should of refilling that well of just experiences.
Right.
To draw on to create things.
That's an excellent point. But yet you of all people seem to be able to do it. Everything that I've seen you do, you just put so much of yourself into it, whether you're directing or whether you're acting, or it's really amazing to watch your energy at work. And, you've got a very active wife. We had Anastasia on the show a few months back, and you have two very busy children. How do you balance all of that and still find time to, network for new projects and start studying lines and even memorize your lines?
I wish I could say good scheduling or something like that. I don't know, it's a lot of texting, a lot of emails and things like that. But also it involves dropping a lot of balls, or at times postponing things, or, because one of the things that I'm pretty bad at is actually prioritizing. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of it's probably more stressful than it would need to be. Mm-hmm. I think scheduling and prioritizing in some ways, but new things come up, and especially with kids, and well, actually in anything, something will come out of the blue, and then you have to fit it in, or your kid will get sick or whatever it is. So life always throws you something that you can't schedule.
Sure.
So it's not so much about, but it's constant communication. Yeah. With my wife, and then it's constant sort of reassessment of keeping perspective, reassessment of what's important.
Yeah.
So that when you are tempted to feel that it might be, that it might be too much, that you can just emotionally go like, you know what, I'm blessed to have a lot of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Would part of it too be maybe utilizing time that is available? Like you take your son to the doctor while you're waiting for the doctor to come in, you're reading lines or you're feeding each other lines.
Oh yeah. When you get down to the actual logistics of it. Oh yeah, sure. It's constant. Mm-hmm. And I say, like, I don't necessarily, I don't thrive inherently on being busy.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, even though, well, actually, ironically, I just said I don't like being bored. Maybe it does come from something like that. Mm-hmm. But I enjoy just sitting. I would love to just sit on the couch and just dream, or look up into the canopy of a forest, or sit on the beach, something like that. It's not like I have to be busy. It's just I'm really interested in things. And so when things come my way, I'm like, oh yeah, that would be cool. Mm-hmm. Or I love my friends. So if they're like, hey, you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, sure. Or something, and then also the need to make a living.
Yeah, that helps.
And so but I say to myself, so like what you're describing, I do all the time, right? Like as I'm doing one thing, I'm thinking about the other thing. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I keep telling myself I don't thrive on that. Like I don't thrive on having to keep track of 4 different email accounts or 5 different email accounts. Yeah. And constantly, and people send Facebook messages and they send texts and voicemails, and although that's the rarest thing now, mm-hmm. and then constantly. So I find that somewhere I'd like to think, oh, I would thrive more doing like the same project for 10 hours straight, rather than split those 10 hours into 5 different jobs.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that, because there's a different level of time commitment to 5 different things versus one thing in that same time frame.
Right. So that you're just always pouring, ideas, and or you're investing in sort of the same thing. I don't know. They do. There's word out there that multitasking is actually that you can't really multitask. Mm-hmm. But that's not really something that is possible.
I think we just switch tracks very quickly and we consider that multitasking.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that there's probably a difference or a fine line somewhere in the middle of boredom and busy that's just maybe active. You're not forcing every second of yourself, and you're not sitting there doing nothing, but there's just a time where you're just active. And I think that might be more where you thrive, because you don't like to have time just pass by without doing something, even if it's looking out through the canopy. You want to be doing something instead of just staring at the wall going, I don't know what's next. I think that's probably where it gets to be like, I don't like that.
Yeah, sort of inspired me. Yeah, it's not very Buddhist.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not very Buddhist of me, though.
Well,
I don't just let it flow through me. I'm always like, but I don't know, but I want to get back into it.
Yeah.
I want to just be able to look at a tree and just enjoy it and not go like, oh, that's a really beautiful green. Just look at it.
Yeah. Well, it's believed now that we just get hit with so many things so fast in the digital age that we don't really let anything soak in or analyze anything because the content is coming too fast now. And I think it's important that we do things like that. And that's why I love doing my walks at the Strip, or sometimes I'll go to the park and really just kind of be away from everything and just kind of breathe and enjoy if there's a pond or you can see the stars out and really just kind of get away from it. But my brain somewhere, some part of my brain is still going, okay, when you get home, you need to do that and you need to call this person. But I try to minimize that as much as possible.
Maybe it does have to do, that's interesting. Maybe it does have to do a lot with the digital age, because if I'm on the computer or if I'm on Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is, or you have your smart device, that anything you can switch, whether it's related to what you're doing or reading at the time, you can branch off from it so quickly.
Right.
So, for example, if I'm looking at something, if I'm looking at a tree online, I can have an idea about that and then go look it up or something right away. Like, oh, that's a really beautiful green. I wonder what that tree's called.
Yeah.
And then I immediately swipe or I immediately go to open the browser.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just taking control of it.
So you get used to, and you get used to the ease of switching thoughts too, and not just being present there. You can just keep scrolling right away, or you can click on something which takes you to a totally different place right away, which is very different than from just being physically present outside of the digital.
Very true. And I think we just need to kind of find some sort of happy medium between the world we knew and the new world that we're dealing with, where we don't lose touch with those things, like taking a moment to go outside and watch the sunset, or which I tend to do one night a year when I'm in Newport Beach. And we have beautiful sunsets here, but I don't usually go enjoy them like I should. So I think we kind of need to take control of that and find that happy medium. And I think we'll be better as creatives for doing it, for allowing our eyes to get away from the medium and the digital, the waveforms and the electrochemicals and all that enter our minds.
Maybe, I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I'd like to think that's, like I was referencing before, like where the well of our inspiration comes from. But then again, I grew up, most of my life, well, let me see. Yeah, most of my life was, or half my life anyway, was spent in the non-digital age, right? So I got all my well was all from life outside of that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But maybe that's not the case anymore for people growing up with it or
yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, if you think about when like Pong and Atari came out, how that started to change things, because then all of a sudden we weren't just plopped in front of the TV to watch the news or Ed Sullivan or whatever. That became okay, now this is a thing that's going to take our time. And I noticed that as that happened, I went outside and played less than I did after Atari. But even living in Colorado, which is a beautiful place, and you grew up, where you grew up, that's just some gorgeous scenery, Yeah,
like in Switzerland. It's because I grew up in Switzerland for most of my childhood.
Yeah.
And adolescence, and I was just thinking, my sons are about to go back up to Washington State, where one set of grandparents live, and they experience a lot of nature and animals and stuff there. We go hiking here, and we have a backyard and that kind of a thing. But they don't experience, let's say, walking in a forest with just the sounds of the forest and the crunching of their feet.
Right.
They don't associate. They don't know what that feels like. As much, or maybe they do, but I don't know. That's a memory for me. Like if I meditate, or if I'm doing, maybe like in an acting class or whatever it is, and they say go to a happy place, and I close my eyes and I imagine that. Yeah, because I have some kind of an internalized association with that. But my kids don't have that.
Yeah, for walking through, whether it's the forest or walking along the shore at the beach, there is something about that elemental connection that I think nothing can really touch that.
No, right. I mean, granted, I went to the zoo to experience animals a lot. I mean, other than the ones I saw, on occasion in the wild, even in Switzerland,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I wonder if you can, what that does if you, get most of your connection to animals through documentaries on Netflix.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of nature videos and just like how animals interact with each other and how they interact with their own species and families. And it's really fascinating, the order that they have and they only have minimal ways of communication, yet they all seem to learn their place and what's proper and what isn't proper. And they respect that very easily. I think maybe it's because we have so many distractions and so many things available to us that we've lost that primal ability.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know, but I think that definitely we're the only species that plays with computers and, has houses and things like that. They just, they're just out there. If they like that spot in the lake, they're just going to sit in it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the first play that you and I worked on together, which to this day is still very close to my heart, which was Brightside.
That's right.
And that is, I've talked about that on the show before. It was a play about a man who is married to a woman who's in the military. He has a strained relationship with their son. He's still trying to be the macho guy in his coming upon his mid-years, I would say. And some things that happened to him along the way, including getting breast cancer and him having to deal with, as a man, having breast cancer. And you played a very important role, in my opinion, in this play. You were the doctor. But you were also, in a way, sort of the let's take a breath and have a little comic relief in the middle of this incredibly serious, heart-tearing play. Is it difficult to come in the middle of serious stuff going on and just go, I'm going to add levity?
Oh, it might be. See, again, I would say it might have been for the director, Will Adamson, at the time, to take that risk. For me, at least in that show, I made the conscious effort to be also quite theatrical with it, almost to the point of changing style, in terms of the other performances and stuff. But as a performer, I just came in and sort of did my thing, and hoping or relying on the director to rein it in or change it if it didn't work for him or for the performance, Right. But it sort of harkens back to what I was saying earlier about thinking about the bigger picture. When I'm performing, I do in rehearsals, I talk about the bigger picture and what might fit and what might not fit and that kind of a thing. But when I'm actually performing, and by the time a show opens, I'm committed to what I'm doing. And I just focus on growing and staying in and also growing in the realm of what I've established. So when you say, is it difficult to do that? Not really.
Because you're just coming in and here's where I come in and here's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, and here's what I'm doing, and I just try to sort of elaborate that and try to do that as well as I can. For better or for worse, I don't. One of the things that I don't. I'm not shy about what I do. I'm sort of. I keep questioning. I wouldn't necessarily go like, oh, I'm confident in what I do, because that would imply that, I don't like using that word, because I'm always searching and I'm always questioning in terms of, okay, did that work, and how can I expand on that, while still trying to be consistent in my work. But I'm always thinking about the impact of what I do, or what I can do with it, and how I can grow in it. But there's a sense of fearlessness that I think I have. I was about to say I pride myself in, but it's just something that I'm not shy about what I do. I don't get stage fright generally.
Fearless is a great word, because I say working with you as a director and working with you as an actor, I would think that that's a great word to describe you. But I think that one of the biggest challenges, and tell me if your perception was different, that I felt for your character in this particular show was that the audience was completely different from one show to the next. Sometimes they kind of appreciated the levity of your character, and other times it seemed like they were almost offended by, why are you trying to make me laugh in the middle of this? And you had to roll with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and then on top of that, arguably, yes. And in that way, I was, I can get nervous. Like there's a certain sense of, a lot of actors often talk about, well, if you're not scared to some degree, then you're not doing your job because you're always putting yourself out there.
Right.
For the sake of the story, for the sake of the production, for the sake of the work. Mm-hmm. And so you're always taking a risk that, like you said, you might actually fall. Something might fall flat. And if you're playing it safe, I suppose you can play things safe. But then the question is, how powerful is the work in that moment? And so especially with humor, if there's no laughter, if you don't hear something, chances are it's not working.
Right.
So at least for some, and I think also in the case of Brightside, it was pretty extreme. Like I like to look at it like a spice. It was like, it wasn't just garlic salt. I put it was like tarragon.
Yeah.
So it's like either you really like it or something. I think it was pretty intense. So it either, I don't know, at times it was a little all or nothing.
Yeah. But it seemed like you rolled with it well. Like if you noticed the audience wasn't really reacting to the humor, you kind of dialed it back and went a little more dramatic versus humor because you worked really well with reading the audience.
Yeah, you got to try. Yes, yeah. I mean, ideally, maintaining the integrity of what was directed,
mm-hmm.
Because that's what rehearsals are for. But there's absolutely, yeah. And I love doing that too. I mean, for me, that's critical. I mean, there's the actors, the performers are one part of the experience, but the audience is just as much an active participant, and you have to work together to create the experience.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a play that I attended that Kate directed. I can't. Once again, I really suck at titles, but a Summons from the Tinker, I think is what it was called.
Yes. At a public fit.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
and the audience at one point started just asking questions during the court interrogation scene. And I thought that they were plants in the audience trying to, just like show that, hey, the cast is around and the play's all around you. But asking Kate after the show, it turned out they were just actual people that purchased tickets, came into the theater, and got so caught up in the play.
Oh, yeah, right. But that was part of it. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And that was part of it. I don't think she directed it, but she was part of it.
Yeah, she was in the show.
It. Yeah, mm-hmm. That was part of the. Mm-hmm. Yep. That was part of the show.
But that goes to show the real variable of the audience, because you really never know when mm-hmm. someone's just going to chime in and be a part of it all of a sudden. And as an actor, you can't just ignore them, but you have to roll with kind of whatever they bring. But I thought I really felt for you on some days because it felt like the audience was particularly cold. And here you're trying to I'm just giving you a breather before the next thing. Trust me, you're going to want this.
Yeah, well, hopefully. But at the same time, some of you, somebody listening to this might very well go like, no, Marks, it's just because your jokes weren't funny, or the way that you interpreted it was just not, it was simply not funny. And that's possible also.
Yeah, sure.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
I guess some humor is more generally palatable, right? I mean, I think there's certain things that are just, more generally funny. And there's certain things like I would watch, I remember Adult Swim on MTV, mm-hmm. which is, I think, when that first started coming out, I felt that was created for a different generation almost, because I would watch some of that stuff and I'd be like, I don't get it. Yeah. I don't get it. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So you can't fake visceral laughter,
sure.
or the different kinds of laughter there are.
Right.
So I would absolutely take credit if somebody came up to me and go like, that's just not funny. But you're absolutely right. It did also come in the context of, a doctor diagnosing and subsequently treating a person for male breast cancer, for breast cancer in a male. And so there was definitely a sense of like, why is this supposed to be, why is he playing for laughs?
Yeah, and it was hard for me behind the board for some of those scenes too, because I know what's coming. And I had a real emotional connection, and maybe it was because this was like the first play that I was involved with since I had moved to Vegas. But there was just so much power in the emotion of that play for me. And I would be sitting by the board going, just hold it together. You just got to get through this scene. He's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like, and just trying to get through some of that stuff. Because even as a spectator watching the show night after night, it was difficult to see some of that stuff. But the hardest part for me is that when I work in film and I do the score for a film, I've always got that film. If I'm ever feeling nostalgic or I want to go, how did I do this one thing? I can just pull up the film and watch it. And when you work in theater, it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's just done. It's gone. There's no record of it. There's no...
Right.
Is that challenging that you can't really go back and see some of the things that you've done over the years? Or am I just too nostalgic, maybe?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking, because even footage doesn't do a live performance justice, right? So even if I had things on tape, it would simply serve the same function as a picture from a summer vacation, or a video of any kind of experience. You can't relive it in the same way that you can relive a movie, I think, even though rewatching something at a different point in your life might bring up different things in you, but it's the same art piece, right? The same way that a visual or even a record or something. So, I mean, something that I think makes theater different and is it's what makes theater, what's special about theater versus what's special about something else is the fact that it's ethereal in that way, that it only exists, that the event exists on that night in real time, in a physical place and a specific time of that one time. It comes and goes.
Right.
And so in some ways that is that does get kind of sad that you can't, especially, things that you really enjoyed and that were very meaningful. But I think that it also fuels the power of the next thing that you do. So the knowledge that what you're doing is only in that moment creates the power for that moment.
Right.
So without that knowledge, it might not be as illuminating when you were doing it. It's the same kind of thing when you talk about children or something, like knowing that they're not going to be 6 again.
Yeah.
They're never going to be 2. They're not going to be 2 forever. And it's that knowledge that actually sort of informs how you live the moment.
But on the better side of things, it also doesn't allow us the chance to scrutinize things because we can watch that scene over and over and over and go, oh, you should have done this. What did I do with my eye there? How come my hand is just sitting there like that? Like, you can't analyze yourself to death. But how does it work for like auditioning? Because when you're working in film, you can get little cuts of different films you've worked on, and you can create a demo reel that you can send in. You don't really get to showcase your private or your previous work when you're in theater.
Oh, yeah. No, you just get excerpts. You might get excerpts on film and put together like a clown demo or something like that of the shows you've been in, or plays if you get the rights. But no, you don't. I mean, in theater, it's more. It's just more about the resume and perhaps your network and your word of mouth, and then of course live auditions,
Sure.
seeing you sort of in person and what you bring to the table and what you bring to the audition and the ideas, the energy and the interpretation of the role, at least in the auditions when you walk in and you do an excerpt or you do a monologue and they can see an example of your craft, see whether you have craft, see, feel your energy in the room, because that's ultimately what the audience is going to witness.
Right.
Is a live person in front of them. So I think that's an important part of a theatrical audition. I think is being physically present in the room, or at least getting recommendation from somebody who has experienced you physically in a room.
Right. Well, plus the fact that, the bigger your resume gets, when it comes to live theater, there's an extreme amount of trust that a director has to put in you to do live theater versus a film where you can shoot things 3 or 4 times and get a good take.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I would think that those credits are pretty meaningful, but it's got to be hard starting out to get 3 or 4 credits under your belt so that you can say, look, I've got a body of work growing. People are trusting me. I would think that's the challenge.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Right. But I like to describe it as like cracking nuts. Sure, when you're in rehearsal trying to crack nuts, I don't know, if myself or other actors always crack all the nuts that there are to crack. So and then you get into the rehearsal process and you realize, okay, this route is not working as well as some other route, and then a great director or a team will work together to get the best out of that team at the time. You know what I mean?
Right.
So a really great director will be sensitive to what works best for an actor, or how to get their actors or their performers to the best place possible for that project, for those performers. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So you have to trust that they'll get to a certain place, but also sometimes you just try to get to the best place that you can.
Or that you believe you can find a way to get them to that place as a director.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must. When you talk about casting, when you talk about agreeing or deciding to work with a person, you have to trust that you'll get to a place that you'll be happy with, and then continue to keep that perspective, to understand that it's a collaborative art form, and that the result is, for better, hopefully not for worse,
right,
the end result of a collaborative process that you don't know what it's going to be until it is.
Yes, absolutely. Because until you see it and see how that person that you're working with, or those people that you're working with, are going to take your idea and turn it into something tangible, could be completely different than what you had anticipated. So either you like it better, or you stay on your toes and modify what you don't like and monitor that as it goes, because that thing that was created develops and changes throughout even the rehearsal process quite a bit.
But that goes for film too, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Yeah. But on film, you can try 3 or 4 different things and pick the best one in editing, depending on how it affects the story. Whereas when you're in front of a live audience, you're making one choice and that's all you get.
At any given point in time, right?
Yeah. I mean, but monitoring and you change.
But you have a rehearsal, right? And you have a rehearsal process, and that's when you talk about, and that's where you work on, consistency or not, depending on what it is that how you want to be executing it in the end. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, interestingly, the next project that you and I worked on together was with Angela Chan, who was on the show a little earlier this year. And we were working at the Adelson School doing Shrek the Musical. And
that's right.
These kids were really varied in age. I mean, from young to getting close to graduation. And so you had a real wide scope of minds and different developmental stages to work with. Was that a real challenge as a director to work with such a varied age?
Yeah, I guess so. But I would say the greatest challenge was just the managerial one. Mm-hmm. It's just, because they're kids and they like to, and it's hard to focus them in a space sometimes.
Right.
But in terms of where to sort of put them creatively, what to do, sort of either instinctively or consciously, just put them in a place that they could thrive in.
Yeah.
Like just you're trying to find that spot, the sweet spot of sort of challenge, and make sure that they feel successful, and therefore the production becomes, successful. Mm-hmm. And the great thing specifically about Shrek, I think, is that you can. There's a great depth to be mined. That you can perform at a different level. There's a lot of different levels mm-hmm. of execution that you can have. That you can have, somebody super experienced and mature, as they did in the original production, who can mine great depths of emotion, mm-hmm. and then there's characters that can have great depths of emotion too. But you could also do it in a school where some of the kids might just like to be silly,
right?
And fairly, and like a wading pool, not too deep, and you can still make it work. And I think that was that's what I love about that piece specifically.
And it was a great production, but interestingly, you had some kids that wanted to be there because that's what they wanted to do, was go into theater. Yeah. And then you had some kids that were like, well, we have to be in this play, or we had to take this class. But they all put in an extreme amount of effort to make the show great. Every one of them did. Uh-huh. And I love seeing that in kids, that passion and dedication, because it's so easy for kids to get distracted and just kind of drop off and go, I don't want to do this now. But they were committed.
Yeah. They was really, well, and hopefully that's the kind of environment that you nurture as a creative team. You like to, I'd like to think that our creative team and myself as a director had to do with that, that had some responsibility in that, but it takes everybody. That's why it's a collaborative art form, and the kids deserve lots of credit for that as well. But it's definitely an effort that you have to write. It's like classroom management. I mean, you have to, you're on it a lot to keep that spark going. It's to keep those embers from going out,
Yeah.
You want to keep finding ways to keep them inspired about it. And sometimes it's about, sometimes you visit the big picture and you keep your eye on the prize. And sometimes it's just making sure that they're active, or they're not sitting around too much, and that they still continue to have fun,
Right.
Because kids are also motivated, they want to have fun. They're not necessarily always motivated by the bigger picture. Specifically though, especially those who don't necessarily want to keep doing it,
Right.
So they might not necessarily love theater in general, but they like this experience because of this, and this. And you want to make sure that when directing kids, that you keep providing those things.
Yes.
For all levels of investment.
Right. And you want to give them good experiences to go with, whether they want to get into theater or not. You don't want them to hate theater because they had.
Right. There you go. That's a much more succinct way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was just the dedication and the passion and the unity that a lot of those kids really would work with each other, really supported each other. And I love that, because as adults, it seems there's not so much that they're competing with each other, at least here in Vegas, but just you'll figure it out. Good luck, sport. Kind of mentality versus let's sit down and work this out together, because I want you to be happy in the show. I definitely think that there's more of a family unity here in Vegas than other places I've lived. But there's less competing as well. I mean, most of the people that are here, they have a show that they work on. The rest of the stuff they do on the side. It's much more supportive and family oriented than, say, Los Angeles, where there might be more people fighting for each job, because there's only so many lead roles or so many supporting roles, and far more people to do them. But here it's a really nice supportive environment. And it was beautiful to see those kids already there without having to be told to help each other. They would just do it.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how much you got to see of that, really, because your focus was being pulled in so many directions.
That's very sweet. Yeah, that's very sweet. It makes me very thoughtful. I wonder, because they got a sense that hopefully, sort of in helping each other, they weren't creating less room for themselves.
Right.
I just had an interesting conversation with Anastasia, my wife, about competition. And healthy versus unhealthy competition amongst people, and she was expressing how much she's thrived, in her work with her, both personal and also in her personal life, but also in her work life with essential oils and things. Once she started seeing, and she has anyway, I think, but once she started really even more focusing in and honing in on seeing other people as a support network, rather than as your competition. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's all get there together.
And that ultimately it lifts everybody up somehow. Yeah. But unhealthy competition, right? Or when people think about, I don't know because if I help that other person, that means that I won't, if I help them get better, then that's going to make me look worse.
Right. Yeah. It's such a sad mentality when people start thinking that way. And I remember listening to a podcast that Jenna Fisher was on after her book had come out about the actor's life, which I highly recommend to any actor to read that book, especially if you're wanting to get into film or television. But she was saying that, there's plenty of work for everyone if we just work together to get it done, was the crux of it. And I thought that's so true, because instead of competing and trying to outdo everyone else, just be you. There are roles for you. Every role needs to be filled, and there's plenty for everyone. I think it's just that people get so dependent on each thing that they go for, that this has got to be the one. This is the one that's going to get me out of working a full-time job, or this is the one that's going to get me away from that family.
Sure, the matter perspective. Sure.
Yeah,
really that matter perspective. Right.
It changes the let's support each other into, I'm supportive of my friends, but I need this job. That becomes the more predominant thing. And if you get to the point where you're saying things like, I know where you live, then that's unhealthy competition.
I think so. I mean, I suppose, the thing is, you have to be the best you can be, no matter what, right? And even I was talking to Jacob, my son, about even if you're like, let's say you're in a 100-meter dash, 100-yard dash, 100-meter dash at the Olympics, and it's clearly about beating the other person. Even if it's that, let's say, the analogous thing being, even if there's only one lead in this movie and there's 100 kids auditioning, you're still only going to get it by being the best you can be. Even if you're sprinting, you're only going to win it by being the fastest you.
Right.
Unless you pull a Nancy Kerrigan, but you shouldn't. Because then you talk about what goes on comes around. That's horrible. But I'm saying you're not going to win by slowing the other person down, hopefully. You know?
Yeah. Oh, you mean when Tanya Harding did the...
When Tanya Harding, not Tanya Harding.
The knee attack,
They're not going to pull a Nancy Harding. They're going to pull a Tanya Harding, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, right, when that happened. A Tanya Harding. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but, yeah, and then, of course, and arguably, I really believe that what goes around comes around, so if one person helps another, then that other person might help another person or yourself in turn, so... Sure. So you can only be the only you. I mean, of course, if nobody else auditioned and you were the only person to audition for King Lear, you might get it. You're probably going to get it.
Yeah, but that's still not a guarantee. Because if you're horrible, they'll be like, we're just not doing this production.
Well, maybe that. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you're right.
But the thing is that if you go and you just give the best audition you can, even if you don't get that part, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road, somebody might be doing a production and go, you remember that guy that we had that auditioned?
Oh, yeah, well, of course.
If you always do the best and just be the best person that you can be, it could lead to all kinds of things. But if you walk in going, I need to get this, and they sense that desperation, they're not going to go, hey, who was that really desperate person that we had? I want to get them into this role,
Yeah, right.
So there's a lot to it. But these kids were just amazing. And I had done a play that year at Anastasia's school, too, with Kate, that Anastasia did the choreography for. And it was another group of kids that were just, it blows me away how it's like watching MasterChef Junior versus MasterChef, where the adults are cutthroat and the kids are just like, come on, you can do it, and cheering each other on. And it's just a whole different world. And I wish we could find a way to hang on to that part of ourselves and not be competitive and aggressive. And like you said, unless it's in a healthy thing or a healthy way, it usually just turns to disaster, but that's who you become.
I think it has to do with a lot of things, why those walls start going up and why those defense mechanisms start kicking in. It could, have to do with survival instinct too, that perhaps as we get older we start to perceive real or imaginary reasons why certain actions are going to jeopardize our future and our survival, or the survival of our family or loved ones, or our company or whatever it is, right? So that if I don't, like you were saying, if I don't get this part, I'm not going to work, or this part's going to make all the difference,
right?
Or if I do this kind of a thing. And I think perhaps in kids, they're hopefully or perhaps not as focused on those things, that the stakes are different, that we start perceiving different stakes.
That's true.
When we're older, and then become more self-centered as a result of it.
Yeah, I think that self-preservation thing is really a big key to it. I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head there.
But it also goes for if we perceive it still goes down to well, even if we focus on I want the best future for myself and my family and my loved ones, is that future, how is that future most attainable? Is it by going it alone, or is it by reaching out and continuing to lift up others, so that even when even if we want to lift up ourselves and our family, there's the thing like Anastasia was saying, well, that's going to happen if we lift up others too. Then we'll all be lifted up.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But I think there has to be a part of you though that naturally wants to do that. It's one thing if you see it and you kind of awaken because you have that realization. You go, you know what, I've been living my life wrong and I'm going to change. But I think for people that don't have that, I really want to help other people as part of their natural personality. it's going to take a lot longer to build that trust with others, because I think people can sense if you have an ulterior motive. Like if I help somebody, I bet they'll help me, versus let's just all work together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thought is, the thing is that oftentimes we still live in a world where for whatever reasons it's most easy for people to keep focusing on what's in front of them,
right,
and themselves and stuff. And so
very true.
And perhaps limited resources. There's the argument like, well, there's only so much to go around.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get sad about that.
It's interesting because we had talked earlier about not having a record of some of these performances. There is a certain element of things that we retain in our heads. And sometimes I'll wake up in the morning and I'll be hearing those kids sing Freak Flag as if I was just at the theater last night. Like that is just burned into my brain. And that's
pretty funny.
I love that song because it's an example of that same kind of unity that they're all building together, saying, look, we're all different, but we're all here to do this together. And I love that song for that reason. But the kids also gave such a great performance of it night after night,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it was kind of an odd place to cut, but it was the best place I could find to do it, that the episodes weren't too lopsided time-wise. So we'll be picking up again with Marcus soon for the second part of his interview. In the meantime, I will be back next week with another wonderful guest, and hopefully you'll enjoy that one too. And remember to leave your feedback. Go to iTunes, to Podbean, to my website, anywhere where you're following the podcast. Feel free to subscribe. That'd be great. And definitely let others know if you're enjoying the podcast and you think they will as well. In the meantime, thank you very much. Go to the HaskinCast Podcast page on Facebook, like it, and be entered into the monthly drawing for a flash drive with all of the mental sauna music I've created up to this point for the albums that have been released. And thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.